But if you were hip, you went there because it was the best dance club in San Antonio.
Everybody accepted you for who you were.
To me, he was like a gay Hugh Hefner. He just had a ton of style.
The city police were really ugly. And I mean, you know, within 3 minutes, there was probably 30 police cars and 2 paddy wagons. I'm Gene Elder. I'm the archives director for the HAP Foundation, which is the Gay and Lesbian History Archive, Gay BLT. History Archive here in San Antonio. We started in 1988. It was it's named after Arthur HAP Veltman. HAP was his nickname, Happy.
HAP came from a very, solid local family, and everybody knew them, and it's a small town here. So he was able to get some things done just out of perseverance, sheer willpower.
My first recollections of HAP were when he had the Kangaroo Court, which had opened a few months before I opened my nightclub, and he was in his office upstairs, which was also the office of the Paseo del Rio Association, and HAP would walk around in his Navy uniform. He was a Naval Reserve, and he'd walk around with this uniform on with a great big cigar. It was completely different from the HAP that everybody else got to know. HAP had a law degree. I think he's got a degree in architecture, he may. And his business experience just played off all those things that he could do, but he didn't want to practice law. He enjoyed doing what he was doing. He loved building San Antonio.
To me, he was like a gay Hugh Hefner. It was the most au courant environment of stylish furniture, very kind of sophisticated, masculine bachelor pad with really neat artwork, but very eclectic. And he had a parrot and this giant Great Dane dog, and he just had a ton of style and just a ton of interesting people all around. And it was just like the hub of the whole gay social world at that point.
I first heard about HAP when he had the rabbit habit, and simply because it had a little rumor of being, if you were a gay man and you were looking for nice gay men to go have a relationship with or meet, that would be a place to do it. They were classy guys there, is what I heard back in those days.
I met HAP because I got a job at the Greenhouse, which is a natural foods restaurant down on the Riverwalk. And I think I was about 15 at the time, and my boyfriend worked there and he got me the job, So, and HAP was my boss. HAP and Bobby Cannon owned the restaurant, and actually became friends with HAP. He was a really great guy, and he used to like to sit and talk to me, after the rush was over and stuff like that. And then a lot. And see, I was a Catholic schoolgirl, and so a lot of the guys would come in. Gene was one of them. Gene used to really shock me back then, and he would try to, it was like, but yeah, I didn't know anything at all about gay people. I'm sure a lot of those priests that I went to school with, were gay, but we didn't know that back then, HAP had the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen. He had eyelashes that were like about this long, like a deer's eyes or something. I mean, he was a really, like I said, warm-hearted, super intelligent, but yeah, really the special person.
I met him at a party. I'm sure we were doing something crazy. From friend Jay Rosenstein, I think that's where I first met him. And he was just, vibrant and full of energy and hilarious and fun and just, one of these people that had this magnetic personality that you couldn't help but be drawn to. He opened the Kangaroo Court with Bob Buchanan. That was like the, premier restaurant on the Riverwalk, and I'm sure everyone thought he was nuts. Who would want to go down there in that, Riverwalk, which wasn't like it is now?
Come to meet HAP.
His mother roomed with my mother in college. He was the same age as my older brother. Families both went to St. Mark's Episcopal Church. Both families vacationed down at Rockport Coast in the month of August. And growing up, Hap really had nothing to do with someone as young as I was. And it wasn't until after I had graduated from college and Uncle Sam had gotten finished with me when I came back to San Antonio. I remember my mother sending me a newspaper article my senior year, which would have been 63, 64, concerning a proposed development on the Riverwalk. And I had gone to a place in Chapel Hill instead of going to my classes at Duke with regularity. And I thought, oh, well, that would be fun to have something like that. And I called Hap and to see if, and made an appointment. And we spoke, and for about 30 minutes, Hap said, that is just an idea that won't work. And I felt very deflated. I said, what am I going to do? I'll have to get a job now. And he said, the reason why I'm saying this is I have these preliminary plans and no capital. You have a little capital, no plans. And the next day we had a partnership. Kangaroo Court, it was an English-style oyster bar, restaurant, and pub, and we had the umbrellas were the Australian flag.
My point was, still is, Castle Rio was on the river before HAP, but the river ran behind Castle Rio. The hotels, the bars, Juana Dick, all the big nightclubs, the river ran behind their places of business. You came in on the street level and you walked in the restaurant and you just may look out the back window and there was the river back there. But there wasn't any tables and chairs out there. Nobody utilized the river at all. And the Kangaroo Court was the first restaurant that actually opened up that faced the river.
Was he out at the time?
Well, he was out. He wasn't publicly out, but he was not being closeted. He was all of his friends knew, and he had a boyfriend. He had several boyfriends through the years. So, I mean, it wasn't. Which is probably why I was attracted to it. There was a freedom there of being who he was that is always appealing to any group of people and people. The person who's showing the ability to think outside the box is, intriguing.
While we were building Royal Street Crossing, we'd spend a lot of time driving around, and he'd tell me stories. Tell me about the stories about the first time he really realized he was gay. I remember going to dances. I think this one happened to be at the country club. And he wound up in the bushes kissing some guy, and he thought, oh my God. Then he realized he really liked it. And that's when he realized, I guess that's what I am, because he dated girls too. But that's when he decided that's, I found out who I am. And it was he told me it was very freeing. It was scary, but a very freeing thing for him too. Interesting, from a perspective that I've never had. I'm straight, so I've never had that kind of a perspective and had to think like that. But he was able to explain it to me in words I understood perfectly what he was trying to talk about.
How was it to be gay in San Antonio in the 70s?
You were only gay among your gay friends or your gay accepting friends. Nobody walked down the street holding hands. Nobody was hanging on each other. We were not San Francisco. We still aren't. Things have gotten better, but there is a, this great fear of the unknown. I wanted to do a program years ago where it was, adopt a gay person and invite them to dinner. They're not going to kill you. They may suggest a few decorating ideas, but, people don't know and they fear what they don't know, which is really stupid,
I'm married now, but at that time, of course, by myself, and I would come down from Dallas, and it seemed pretty provincial to me, but I mean, because up there we had the old plantation, and we had some really, I remember the first time I saw that bar, I just thought, God, this is just the most amazing place. And the bars in Houston were amazing, because there were areas of town down there. Then we didn't really have that in San Antonio.
In the 70s, there was a lot of unacceptance of the gay community and live and let live, which I've kind of a live and let live kind of a person. So I had some adjustments when I did move to San Antonio, finding a clique that was accepting of me and my out of the ordinary ideas.
I had been living in New York and came back to San Antonio when I finished my military obligation, and it was a real culture shock because New York had gone through Stonewall and a whole bunch of awakening of the whole gay liberation. And then I moved back to San Antonio, and it was kind of like a time warp. Like I went back in time, not one decade, but maybe two. San Antonio, of course, was very different because I had not been out when I was gay. So it was discovering a whole new gay San Antonio in the early 70s, but still very, very different from the rest of what the country was going through. You would be in a bar, particularly one that I remember called the Arena, and suddenly the jukebox would be turned off, and San Antonio police and military police would come in, checking IDs for military people and things like that.
That was my experience back in the 70s. That San Antonio had a thriving gay community, but it was a gay community that did not want to be seen by the light of day. There were no parades, there were no events that were televised, or of course they wouldn't have been televised, but everything was very hush and low key. And I think, again, that's because you've got a Hispanic community, a Catholic community, and a heavy military presence. And all three are conservative, closeted communities. But it didn't stop the bars from making money, and it didn't stop the partying. But it did set San Antonio back in things like civil rights marches and parades and getting people to, especially when AIDS came along, getting people active and involved.
Right now it's the 7th largest city in the United States, but it's something like the 32nd media market. So there's 25 smaller towns with bigger media than us, just because the demographics of this place have always been very strange, with the military and the Hispanics. But yeah, it's ancient ground. I love it here myself. And so if you were interested in new music or art or whatever, you gravitated towards the scene. And so that's kind of how I would always see him around at the art shows and music events and stuff, King William Fair. So, yeah, and everybody that was interested in that stuff stuck together.
The gay bars in San Antonio were all sort of around San Antonio College.
Has anybody brought up the El Jardin? The El Jardin, that was a bar on St. Mary Street that I think it went back to the 1960s. It was maybe the first or the oldest gay bar, and right around the corner from that was the Crew, and the Crew went back to the early 70s. So before the Bonham, before the San Antonio Country, there were other bars that had been around for a long time, but they were sort of the old-fashioned queer bars. They were the dark holes with no windows, and you almost had to have a secret knock to get into them.
I think I write that there was a gay bathhouse in the basement of the Gunter Hotel.
Yes,
Really?
I went there.
And then, in the early 70s, a lot of people from San Antonio would go to Austin or Dallas or Houston, particularly Austin, because Austin had good bars and all of that, and they knew they wouldn't run into somebody that they knew from work or whatever. Of course, the joke is if you ran into somebody from work, they were probably gay too, so it didn't matter.
So it's like there was this underground world that you only the initiate knew about.
Starting the San Antonio country, which I did, Happy is kind of who brought me out as a gay person. I hadn't studied gay history either. I mean, they didn't teach that. And, I knew nothing about Stonewall or anything. We just jumped into it cold turkey. Happy sort of knew what he was getting into. The San Antonio country was fabulous. It was fabulous. It was originally a house, and it was made out of river rocks. The outside of it was, and inside it had one large room with 3 domes in it, and a big fireplace on this side, and a rose window on the other side. And the one big room in front of the fireplace, it was a lot of conversation, and people moved the chairs around. It was very, very neat the way people sat and talked and moved, and then the pool table was down there, and then in the little front room, which was a sort of I wanted it to be sort of like the elder gentleman's place. They would come. I had Glenn Miller music playing up there, and of course the paintings were around on the walls with little spotlights, so it was very nice. And then from the pool room, it went back into another. This is still part of the original house. It must have been the little kitchenette or something. But anyway, it had a neon light on the ceiling that we stayed there, and we put mirrors all around it in this bunkette. And so that's where all the drag queens hung out. They held court in this room. You had to go through the drag queen room to get from one to the other. And then the back room was a dance floor. And, of course, we played, only the most hip dance music. There were a certain amount of guys that, didn't dance. They were kind of leather guys, and they came and played pool. And you had your fraternity guys, It was very, what was nice about it is that since there were not any other bars, everybody had to come. So it hadn't factioned off into everybody having their own bar. You had to put up with each other. And the lesbians were there. They particularly kind of liked coming there, I think, once they found their girlfriend, because then if they go to the lesbian bars, everybody's, still hitting on them, so they come to the gay bar so they can be left alone.
I saw Hap at the other gay bar, and he said, we're opening next weekend. So I was there the first night, and it just totally took off from day one. It was a very wide spectrum of people. There was a gay bar, but there were plenty of straight people that were there, coming with friends, and there were hippies, there were construction workers, there were Hispanics, there were just anybody and everybody. It was sort of the place to be.
And then that was the beginning of the San Antonio country, and it was really an unbelievable experience. And so once I was involved with having to do with like decorating or whatever you want to call it, putting the art up, I thought, I want to work here. So I did, and I worked there for maybe 6 years, I guess.
The country was kind of a place where maybe because it was a gay bar or whatever, but there were a lot of people just went there to have a good time. And it really was a good time,
Well, it was not long before every homosexual male in Texas knew that the San Antonio country had opened in San Antonio. And you know how crowded Fiesta is around here. Well, I mean, Lubbock, El Paso, Dallas, Houston, Waco. I mean, there were just so many gay men in San Antonio. It was just mind-boggling. I mean, it was overwhelming. There was not enough hands to serve the beer, you know.
The first time I ever went to the country, I was thinking about this the other day. You know, if you were marginally hip, well, definitely if you were gay, but if you were hip, you went there because it was the best dance club in San Antonio. It had all the latest music. You know, the disco rage was happening, you know, at the same time at the country. And it was the only place in town where you could dance to really good disco. So, of course, all the gay guys were there. And then the really hip girls, straight girls would come. And the lesbians were there too. But the really hip straight girls would come because they wanted to dance. So they'd come with their gay friends, gay boyfriends. And then the really hip straight guys would be on the trail of the straight girls.
Me and a lot of my friends, straight friends, went to the country because it was just a great atmosphere to dance, you know. They didn't check penises at the door or anything. You just go in and dance, you know.
So it was summer, I think, of 1975 that I discovered the San Antonio country. And my older sister introduced me to the club because she had a gay friend, her best friend in high school, George. And so she heard about it and told me about it and took me there. And it was a wonderful place.
It was like a liberal wonderland. Everybody was dancing. People would dance by themselves at times. You didn't even have to have a partner of the same sex. You just danced with you. One guy would come and he would dance with big giant fans by himself, flipping the fans around and didn't need a partner. And it was so much fun because you could just think how you wanted to think, and you were accepted with who you were.
This is how I told my parents that I was a homosexual. And because I wasn't speaking to them, I was mad at them for, you know, something, you know, a spoiled little Trinity student. I got mad at them about something. But speaking to them, and so all they knew was that I was running a nightclub, which they assumed was some sort of heterosexual nightclub. They brought the Newmans down. And they came to the club on a Saturday night. And by the time they left, my father had figured out, he'd even asked me, he said, "There are an awful lot of men in here." I said, "Yeah, you know." Well, my mother cried for a year. I mean, she did not take this well. My father was in the furniture business, and he'd been around a lot of talented gay, I think, decorators and stuff. He was kind of he handled it better. He basically just didn't have anything to say other than I think he told my mother that, you know, I was still his son, and, you know. But my mother didn't take it well. And the reason that she didn't take it well is because her generation had taught that when this kind of thing happens to your child, it's the mother's fault, you know.
And of course, I guess people are looking for romance, so that you just felt like, well, this is the place to look.
I didn't get to San Antonio until 77. And, you know, this was just after Stonewall, and as Larry Kramer famously said, our entire political agenda was sexual promiscuity, and it was, you know, and so that's what I did. I remember there was one 7-week period in the summer of 1975 where every night, that's 49 consecutive nights, I went out and went home with a different guy. And, you know, today people think that's a bad thing. So moving to San Antonio, I knew that it was going to be a radical difference.
And in fact, it was. The bars were sleepy. The first time I went into the country, I looked at this brown shag carpet, and I was like, well, but where do you throw up? It just didn't make any sense to me. It looked like some extended family's big living room. and it was very friendly, and they did this dance. I had no idea what it was. And I said, is this the Virginia Reel? And they said, no, it's called the Cotton Eye Joe. I'd never seen that before. And it was much more amiable. It was much friendlier, but it was much less sexy, much less geared toward hooking up. Our best night was the night we met, because
How did you make it?
Tell that whole story, please.
well, I was just going down there because it was the biggest bar in town. It wasn't my favorite place, but I don't really know that I had one. And so I was there, and there were some people there that I knew at the front bar, which was the quieter. You could have a conversation. But in walking through the bar, I noticed there was this one. The transition between the front bar and the dance bar in the middle was this kind of long wall.
Brick wall.
And there was this guy there standing like Joe Buck in Midnight Cowboy with one leg up and his cowboy hat and his thumbs and his jeans, and looking very stern. And Ron introduced you as his Mexican cousin, as he always did, and
the lady.
And Tom doesn't remember our meeting.
I'm not sure I trust all of his memory, because I did not wear a cowboy hat. I do not wear cowboy hats. No one wears a hat anymore.
What do you mean anymore? It was 1977.
I didn't wear cowboy hats.
Okay.
Except when I was riding
Maybe
horses.
you didn't have. Maybe that was my wishful thinking. So the country is very important to us. It's where we met.
There was a funny story. Back in those days, men used handkerchiefs, color-coded handkerchiefs, to sort of convey what their sexual preference is. And you wore it in one pocket if you were dominant, and the other pocket if you were passive, and they were different colors for different things. And I did not know about the color coding. I just knew all these gay men are wearing handkerchiefs in their back pocket, and that's real hip. So I got a handkerchief and I put it in my back pocket. And I was in the bathroom, standing at the urinals, when a man asked me, "May I pee on you?" And I said, "Absolutely no, you may not pee on me." And the guy on the other side of me said, "Well, what are you wearing that handkerchief for then?" Because obviously I was disgusted by the proposition. And that's when they pointed out to me that yellow meant that you were into water sports.
Wow.
And that's when it hit me. Oh, you not only have to know what color your handkerchief is, you have to know which pocket you want.
The drag shows, like, what was
Oh, they were great. Bring in, like, they had kind of a cadre of like hometown talent that would, and that were, some of those guys were so hilarious. I mean, they would, like, there was this one that was always doing these Bette Midler routines and stuff like that, and I remember this at the country because it's one of the first nights I was working there, and guys would always give you notes to take back to the drag queens, like, can we meet you or something, like that. And I remember one time, because I was just hanging around outside the dressing room door, and one of them said, "Well, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I have a note for, like, Diana Ross or whoever," and they were like, "Well, just go in there, honey. We're not going to bite your tits off," and I was like,
But I had already known Gene Elder, who was the manager, from. I used to take classes at Trinity, and he was a Trinity student. I was doing ceramics, and I had made all these bud vases, and some of them were really short. They're kind of like test ones. They weren't the tall ones. And I remember one night I didn't have any money, so I took this little bud vase with me and sat up at the bar and said, "Would you trade a vase for a beer?" And he said, "Oh, sure." So I gave him the vase, and he gave me a beer.
Because I always thought it was kind of an interesting mystical experience to run a gay club, for a year. I always thought, I should have a degree in psychology after this because I have heard it all.
One funny thing, one night we were dancing at the country, and I was living in King William in a little apartment, and it was 2:00 and it was time to go home, and we were just having the best time and we didn't want to leave. And it was one of those freaky nights where we were in the car, we were heading home, and realized it was so out of it we were, that it was turn your clocks back an hour. So we had an extra hour, and I remember we just did like a wheelie in the street, turned around, headed back to the club, got another hour in. That was great. That was really fun.
And of course, during our first year, the military decided that we were probably a problem and they wanted to put us off limits. But of course, before they do that, they send the MPs in regularly to check for military.
And then a lot of times, a lot of people had short hair, so they would get questioned too. We tried all kinds of things, getting lawyers and everything to try to keep them from harassing the people because they could come and ask you, and I think that's an insult, or that's invading your privacy. But we couldn't do anything about it, so we just had to live with it. But a lot of times they would come in and they would haul people away, take people out.
The military police came in with explicit instructions that it was off limits to the military. They didn't want military in there. I don't understand that rationale, but if the guy was gay and he wanted to go to a gay bar, what are they saying? They don't want anybody to know he's gay, he wanted to hide it or whatever it was, but they would come in and harass guys that looked like they were military personnel.
In fact, my early memories of the military coming in weren't so much raids as just quietly men with flashlights going and asking men with short hair to see their identification. And I don't know if you were allowed to refuse to show them your identification. They never asked me. I really didn't look like I was in the military. I didn't look like anything the military wanted.
Military police would come in particular because we were on the banned list, and for military people were not allowed to come in there, so they would come looking for military people, and I was in there when they would come in looking for underage people. Happy would fight. Happy was also a lawyer, so he would take issue with why are we on the banned list, and he would fight that all during the time that he was alive. It was a constant where they would put him on the banned list, and then he would go over there and he would fight to get the military people be able to come into his bar, and then they'd put him on the banned list again and he'd go back and fight it. It was a constant battle.
So the cops would come in and ask for ID, and the cops would ask for the military ID. If you did not have, like at that time, a draft card or could show that you were not in the military, then the military police would cuff you and take you off to base. Now the funny story about that is one of my close friends was there that night, and he was picked up and taken back to base. He was at Fort Sam. He was written up and he had to go before his superior officer. His superior officer read it, looked at it, and said, "Oh honey, don't worry about it. I'll pull it in 3 days when nobody's looking." And so, we were in the military too, folks. No big deal.
And in this one MP was always beating his nightstick as he walked through the club, to intimidate people. And that was where we first figured out that that's what internalized homophobia looks like. Because we watched all the other MPs, and I would say that there was probably over a period of time, maybe as many as 10 different MPs. There were different ones every time, but this one particularly liked coming every time, or a lot. The other MPs, they kind of walked through and walked out and really didn't, want to get into this or create a problem, or they were not, you could tell that they were not there to, but this one particular one was doing, and we kept thinking, well, what is he getting out of this? And you can this is kind of where we understood that gay men that want to prove they're not gay become really hostile and anti-gay to prove to the straight guys that they're not gay. And I'll tell you, talk about homophobic, the Express News was it. Express News, it took a while for the Express News to come around. They were a big problem. By December of that year, they had planned to raid the place. They had the city police in on this too, which was amazing. The city police were really ugly. And during a Christmas Saturday night, the most productive, business night, that's when they like to raid. That's when they can disrupt stuff. And this one MP, the one that had kind of notoriously been causing trouble throughout, decided on this incredibly crowded evening where everyone's bumping into everybody, especially through these little passage areas, that he had been pushed by this, very young-looking, slight student from Austin, and proceeded to take him outside and call for backup from the city police. And I mean, within 3 minutes, there was probably 30 police cars and 2 paddy wagons there. And the police requested to use the microphone, which HAP knew at the very beginning there was not going to be any microphone. Because, see, this is what they had done in the past at gay bars. They'd turn off the music and use the microphone to disrupt the crowd. And our DJ, Jamie Alexander, was told by HAP, he said, whatever you do, don't stop the music. And he didn't. And so they weren't able to, so a lot of people didn't even know this was going on. I mean, it's so crowded, and they're pushing this. Well, so I go outside and try to see what's happening, and this one policeman is like throwing this student up against the car and jamming his billy club into his stomach. And, and I walked up and I said, I don't think that's necessary. And of course, then he raises his club, to me, and here I am, the owner. He didn't want to talk to the owner about anything. It was just, get back in the club and shut up. This is what I was instructed to do. I immediately called Happy, and Happy came down, and we just kind of stood there and witnessed stuff. Now, the interesting thing that happened, of course, everything was being handled by Happy since he knew what to do, and he had Jerry Goldstein and Mari Maverick, 2 lawyer friends of his, 2 civil rights lawyers, 2 of the best civil rights lawyers in town, who were giving him excellent advice on how to handle this. Because, see, the military had been used to getting away with whatever they wanted to. If they wanted to come throw you in jail and harass the enlisted people that are there, well, there wasn't anything you could do. And but we did do something. And so Happy had decided that he was going to pursue challenging this. It's not really a legal case. It's a hearing. So he went before these hearings to confront these accusations that we were a gay bar, which, of course, my beginning radical, understanding of how to solve a problem at that time was, well, fuck yes, we're a gay bar, What Jerry Goldstein said, oh, no, that isn't what you do. Make them prove it. So and we have the transcripts from that, which is, having these MPs that have not ever had to come out and give their... And this was a room full of about, 20 to 30, officers and stuff all around. And I'm sitting there instructed not to say anything. Jerry Goldstein and HAP's there. And they call up the MPs and say, now, how did you know that this was a gay bar? Well, we went in there and there were, men sitting next to men and kissing, and there was, 3 men dressed as women, and those transcripts are very funny. The things that they would say, like the one MP who was like trying to explain to the officers, if they were men dressed as women or vice versa and all this sort of thing. And they said, well, how did you know it was a man? And he said, well, because there was an erection. The proper placement of the penis. That was his way of saying that. And which made me think he was lying, because I know these drag queens don't get erections. It's like, hello. This went on all over the United States. I think we all had our own little stone walls. I mean, I think probably every city did. San Antonio just a little more unique since we had so much military here. The way it got solved is the person at the military base, and of course I don't know who it was, because this was kind of told to us by a couple of military people that had the inside knowledge, and they told us. They told HAP stuff, that person got shipped off. This was a ranking officer of some sort who was creating all the problems, who was insisting on all this monitoring and working with the police to create this raid, because they were going to, we can't have a gay bar, and this was a really nice one, we can't have that going on. We had defended ourselves, and of course, that didn't stop it from ever happening again, because then, in the 80s, they pulled the same thing on Kay Ford and her lesbian bar, and it was even uglier with them.
Then he started to get hassled because the Valero Energy bought the land across the river, put up its 2 buildings there, to put up the where Valero Energy built with the faces away from the river. That's how insane that was. It was designed by a Houston firm which had no idea what San Antonio was. You don't build something on the river facing away from the river, but they did. But to get rid of this blot on them, this gay club right across the river, they tried to force Happy out.
And then I remember all the turmoil around the idea that they were going to close the bar in order to make it a parking lot for this big company across the street, because the company didn't like looking out the window and seeing the gay people in the bar down below, and we were sort of offended by that. I think there was the offense was a little bit from HAP Veltman's point of view. I think he did well on the business of that.
Towards the end, we were getting raided all the time. I mean, all the time. I wasn't there for a military. Like, I don't ever remember MPs coming in, but the cops were coming in all the time,
But yeah, they came, the military police, the vice squad, and the ABC. It might have been the LCB back then, Liquor Control Board. All of them hit him with a real short period of time when they were trying to force him out.
Kind of the head of Valero at that time. I think his name was Bill Greehey, who's now, the savior of San Antonio with all the money he's given around. But I think he was the person who decided that there was a gay bar on the other side of the river, and we need to get rid of that because we need that for our parking lot.
The Valero people trying to force him out. It was really disgusting. And back then, those were in the 70s. You couldn't even, or the early 80s, you couldn't say, you gay bashing, because,
I think it with all the police attention at the very end, it just got less fun because, people are always like, oh my God, the police are here again, and.
So eventually Hap had to pull his ace out of his sleeve and say, wait a minute, I'm going to buy the building. And he was able to get enough cash together to buy the building and then turn around and sell it to the people who wanted to develop for their parking lot for the Valero building, and made enough money in that to buy the Bonham.
And it is funny because the carpet store next door has never changed. Not one iota since then. That's the same carpet store with the same carpets in the window. It hadn't changed one iota. And the funeral home across the street, none of that's changed. Why the mad rush to tear it down and put in the parking lot for the Southwestern Bell? You know, that's progress for you.
I thought the Bonham Exchange was the most beautiful bar I had seen ever at that time in my life. I went up to him and told him that. Matter of fact, I told him how proud I was of it and how much I appreciated him doing it.
I do remember when the Bonham opened, that was a big deal. You know, that was the biggest gay bar in Texas. And that was like, wow, thank you, HAP. This is amazing. We have fallen up.
He died in 1988 of AIDS, and it was my idea at the time. Well, he had left in his will to start a foundation after both his partners would die. He wanted a foundation to keep going.
Losing Hap was a really big blow because he was just one of those people that brought everybody together.
The last time I saw Hap, we went over to O.Z. White's house, and Hap was there with his boyfriend of the time, and he looked really bad. I mean, he looked very thin and
He was frail.
and very frail. But he was still talking about some project. I can't remember exactly what. But we have to do this. We have to do that. So,
They're still very upbeat and
Yeah.
very congenial. Not at all, depressed or sad or anything. He just was very thin and frail looking.
The last time I saw HAP, though, unfortunately, I didn't know it was going to be the last time. You never know. And I was in Aransas Pass. My parents had a place there, and I was visiting them. And I went over to the island to see HAP. And he wasn't in a good mood that day. So he let me in. I went out on the porch, and we all sat talking, but HAP went in. And so everyone just kind of let HAP go in and have his bad mood. Had I known that was the last time I'd see him, I would have made more of an attempt to get him to come out and visit with us that day, but he wasn't feeling good.
Yeah, I went up and visited him in the hospital a couple of days before he died. Jim Stidell and I went up. And he was still saying, I'll beat this. Didn't look like he was going to beat it. And because one day he was parked in his truck outside on Presa Street, and he passed out. He said, oh, he was from hunger or something, but that was when we knew it was really bad. And he went downhill real fast then.
I was living in New York at the height of all the AIDS thing, and people were dropping like flies, I mean, all of us who are alive now that lived through that, we ask ourselves, why are we here, HAP was an amazing person. He really was way ahead of his time. He just really had a vision about San Antonio and about, our lives. I mean, we didn't know what we had in HAP Veltman. He was really something. I miss him, and I wish he were still with us, because the things he did accomplish and the things he could have accomplished had he lived a little bit longer would have been amazing.
Just say one thing. His wake was, without question, the most fun party I've almost ever been to. Everybody you would want to see was there, and there was just everyone remembering all the wonderful times that they'd had. It was just a terrific chance for everybody to wish him goodbye. My friend Walter got up on this ladder, and then they released hundreds of balloons, helium-filled balloons, into the air.
One of the thing that I most remember of the country was very influential in the development of San Antonio gay community, sort of precisely because it was like the hip places on the West Coast or New York. It was, you know, it was out in the open in a way. It was downtown on that little section of the river, so it was forward looking. And that was unusual for San Antonio.
It was sort of like our Studio 54 kind of thing. The country really was pretty much, it epitomized the cultural phenomenon of the 1970s.
I think there still is a lot of nostalgia from people that know the country. That was, like I said, that was a good mental time. You know, psychologically, it's what I think formed us as a gay community in San Antonio.